What's up, parents? It's Seth, and today I want to talk about Black Lives Matter. And in this video, I'm going to be speaking to your child. So if you like this video and you want to share it with your child, you feel it's appropriate for them, feel free. This is who I am speaking to during this video. So what is up, students? Most of you are middle high school, maybe some college students who are watching this. I'm really glad that you're here. I'm going to be talking about Black Lives Matter. I'm going to be talking about a few notable people, and I'm going to be talking about a few notable concepts. And in attacking this subject here, students, and talking about Black Lives Matter, whether you are Black, whether you're Asian, Hispanic, and white, I'm speaking to a lot of white people in this in particular because it's very important that we address some issues that white people don't address effectively. Or whoever you are watching this, I'm trying in this video to do some justice to this topic and to bring something to the conversation that can be helpful to you. And this is a tall order. I've thought a lot about how I could do this, and this is my thing. Basically, not a lot of people are making videos for you and speaking to you, to people of your age, and really thinking about what you need to know. So that's what I am trying to do in this video. The first thing I want to say to you students, you young people, you amazing young people that are taking the time to care enough to watch this, is that the change in this world, a lot of people are doing everything we can, but ultimately we are leaving the world to you. We are going to leave this on your shoulders, and it is going to be up to you to continue. Now, that's good news and bad news. The bad news is we should have already created an amazing world free of prejudice for you, free of racism, where everybody is equal and where it's just a known and it's a given. And unfortunately, we are leaving you a world that is riddled with problems and hatred and racism and prejudice and these things. So it's going to be up to you to carry the torch. So we're doing what we can right now. But the reason I say this to you is because there are two things that we can do, that you can choose to do, that I can choose to do. You can choose to be a part of the problem, or you can choose to be a part of the solution in any given topic. And here now, with Black Lives Matter and with what's going on in the world, the same thing. You get to choose. Do I want to be a part of the problem, part of the solution? And to break this down as simply as possible, here's what I want to say to you. You get to choose to be active or passive. Active means you're doing something. You don't have to save the world, but are you taking some actions for good? Reading, learning, connecting, growing, going to protests, protesting in your own ways, speaking up, speaking your mind, speaking your voice. Are you being active or are you being passive, just watching things happen? We need people to be active. You get to make a choice of how you live your life. Now, having said that, let me tell you, anybody who has been active will tell you this, that there are risks and consequences to be active because people don't want you to be active. There is resistance. They want things the way they are. They want hatred and prejudice and racism and things like that. They are benefiting from it and they want to continue benefiting from it. So you will find that when you speak your truth and you try to speak up for something, that people will push back in many, 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 many ways. Some very subtle and some very outright. Either way, speak your truth. Active, passive. Do you want to be active or do you want to be passive in this world? So, as I said, I want to mention this too before I go into one of the people I want to talk about. And the thing that I want to mention here is my fear is that everything goes back to the way it was. And we keep turning a blind eye and sticking our head in the sand and pretending that racism isn't happening, that it's not real. That's my fear. Why do I fear that? Because I've been alive long enough to see that there is a thing called lip service. And that is that the powers that be will say all the right things and try to act like they're all awesome and things are great and they're making a real difference and blah, blah. And they're not doing anything. It's lip service. They're just trying to get people to be quiet. And I am so done with this. I'm so done with racists and inequality and suffering, and it's just wrong. And I just I hope that we're at a point where we don't get quiet, that we don't, in a couple weeks or a couple months or a couple years, that we don't forget and that we don't stop putting the pressure on, because change will not happen. Like, this is just the beginning. We have a lot of work to do in this area. So my hope is that it doesn't go back. Again, you and I and everybody watching, everybody who's a part of this, we all have to be active and take action if things are going to really change. I mean, systemically change, because the problems are systemic. All right, first notable person I want to talk about is Langston Hughes, who wrote one of my favorite poems in the world, and it's very short. But the metaphors in this poem I've related to in my life, but definitely in terms of Black Lives Matter, this is really important. In this poem called Harlem, the first sentence says, "What happens to a dream deferred?" And before I get into the poem, I want to talk about what a dream deferred is. A dream is a hope, something that we hope happens. And having a dream deferred means that we're hoping for something, we're really hopeful, we're dreaming that this good thing is going to happen, but it's deferred, it's pushed off. And in the United States of America, Black people, African Americans, have consistently and repeatedly have had the dream of freedom, of true freedom and true equality and true opportunity, what we're all supposed to have here. They've had it deferred. They've been told, we're not listening to you. Well, I'll say, things have changed. There's no racism anymore. The dream is deferred and deferred and deferred. How would you feel? And I know you've had dreams deferred, hopes, things that you thought would go a certain way and they didn't. How does it feel to have a dream deferred? Here's the poem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it just explode? It has been, okay, that's the end of the poem. The dream deferred has been sagging like a heavy load. It's just been sagging like a heavy load. And right now, with the protests, with the riots even, it's exploding. It needs to be exploding. Sometimes things have to get really bad. If you think about, if you are a student, middle, high school, college student, you've heard about alcoholism, drug addiction. Alcoholics and addicts have to hit bottom before they change. And sadly, in culture, it seems like we have to hit hard bottoms before we change. And I sure hope this is the bottom. And I sure hope that we're changing, because it's exploding right now. And I hope that these explosions are things that inspire change. So that was the first person. First word I'm going to talk about is prejudice. Prejudice. Pre-Judas. Pre means before. Judas means judge. So before judge, to judge somebody before they know the facts or before they investigate, to judge somebody, to prejudice. So that is what racism is about. People make a judgment based on the color of the integumentary system. Your body is made up of body systems. Your skin is your biggest organ in your body, the integumentary system. It protects us. And the color of our skin, people make judgments based on color of skin. This country was built on racism. So Europeans came here. They killed tons of Native Americans. That's called genocide. So there are many Native American tribes that no longer exist whatsoever. That's genocide. They were killed and their land was taken. And then slaves, African slaves, were brought over here in the most horrific conditions that you did not learn about in your education. You did not learn how bad it was and how bad the genocide was. I think we try to protect kids, which in a way is good up until a certain level. Then we need to know the truth about our history. And these slaves built everything that white people benefit from today. They built it all. And this brings up a topic of reparations, which I'm don't have the time in this video to get into, but you should learn about what reparations are. So these prejudices, these biases, they're unconscious, they're unjust, they're unfair. But people who carry them, prejudice is taught. So they either learn from their parents or their communities or somebody or culture or society. There are a lot of subtle prejudices that people learn where they think they're superior and someone else is inferior. Now, this can be in other ways. This can be men and women, men thinking they're superior. This can be in many ways. But right now, we're talking about Black Lives Matter. Right now, we're specifically talking about blacks. There are many other people who we want everyone to be equal. But at this time in history, this is what's important. We must work with this and focus on this. Next person I want to talk about is a guy named W.B. Du Bois. Now, a lot of you have heard of Booker T. Washington, and a lot of you haven't heard of Du Bois. Well, Booker T., who wrote the history books you're reading? Usually white men. Who determines what's going to be in history books? It's not black history, that's for sure. It's not Native American history. It's not history of the Japanese in America. It's not history of women in America. So what is this history? But Du Bois... so Booker T. Washington at the turn of the 19th century, early 1900s, he said, the races, black and white, he said we should be separate but equal. Separate is the fingers, but equal is one in the hand. Well, Du Bois said, what? So Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois were two black men around the early 1900s who were some of the first what you would call activists or people speaking out. And Du Bois said, separate is not equal. That's not equal. So he was a very important person, and he wrote a book called The Souls of Black Folk. And he's a really interesting person. If you haven't read him, you might like to explore him. Now I want to talk about Juneteenth. So basically, slaves are freed. But do you think that the slave owners went to their slaves and said, hey, y'all, you're free? No. They kept on as long as they could. Finally, we have Juneteenth, where supposedly the remaining slaves were told, you are free. But that still doesn't mean that slavery was over, and it still doesn't mean that racism and prejudice and horrific, the most unspeakable things and treatment you can ever imagine continued. It kept going. Systems don't like to change, and the racists did not want to give up. They had built their whole lives on slaves' backs. They don't want to lose that. These are horrific human beings. I want to talk about the term white fragility. There's a term now called white fragility, and that is that white people are afraid and unwilling to have serious discussions about. Now, this isn't all white people, but a lot of white people are very fragile. They don't want to feel like they live in a racist society, or they've participated in racist society, or that they've benefited from racism. Let me tell you, as a white man, I know that I have benefited from a racist society in so many ways my whole life. I never, ever, ever have had to worry about getting pulled over by the police and having something bad happen, except for getting a ticket. I've never had to worry about having a gun pulled on me by police. I never have to worry about being followed around a store thinking that I'm shoplifting. I never have to worry about wearing a hoodie and somebody thinking something bad about me. All of these things that it's so common for black people to have to experience. I, as a white man, have never had to experience this. Now, the thing about white fragility is white people benefit from the system of racism, even if they don't know it. But the thing is that white people have a hearing problem, okay? And what I mean by that is that some of our parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers, some of the white people that we know, if you're white and you're watching this, you will find many white people who are like, oh, this doesn't happen. And they will have many, many, many excuses. They're fragile. They cannot have a serious conversation. They have a hearing problem. What I mean by a hearing problem is they have an inability to hear black people saying, what is going on? We're done. Stop this. We need help. Please stop this system. This is going on. And white people are not hearing it. Their ears are covered, and they're just oblivious, and they don't understand how they benefit from systemic racism. So I want to talk about white fragility because it invalidates them. Have you, the person watching right now, have you ever had an experience where you're trying to communicate to your parents or your teachers or somebody or a friend, you're trying to tell them something and they're not listening to you? They don't hear you. And you're so frustrated you're not being heard. Well, imagine your whole life you're in a racist society and you're not being heard. That things are different, that you're not being treated equally, and people aren't hearing you. Imagine the level of frustration if that was how it felt like in your culture. Meanwhile, for any African Americans in my audience that are watching this, if I'm leaving something out, if I'm miscommunicating something, please leave it in comments. Please let me know. Please let me know if I should make more content. If you want to be on anything, just let me know how I can help you be heard, because I'm just doing the best I can to address some things that I think are important in this topic. So white privilege is a thing. So I want to mention to you students too, you need to understand that what happens in this society of racism is that there are inequalities that you don't see, that I don't see, that white people don't see. And there are inequalities in a lot of areas, in healthcare, in jobs and employment, in the justice system and incarceration, and getting equal pay, and in education. I'm an educator, I'm a teacher, I believe in education. Well, there are tremendous inequities in education. All right, I want to go back to this point. Again, this is up to you to choose. This is the world we're leaving you. How do you want to show up in this world? Do you want to be active or passive? I'm going to say that a few times. Okay, back to it. Now, as a culture, we're at sort of this turning point. One of the most, if not the most, covered blues song. Now, the blues in African American history is extremely important. Blues music communicates. There's a song called Crossroads. And that song has been covered so many times because it's such a powerful metaphor. And what happens is we are at a crossroads right now. We can either go this way or this way. Now, like I said before, we're at this crossroads, and if we go this way, it might look like change. There might be a lot of lip service, but things are going to stay the same. People are going to just get things to change enough for everybody to be quiet, and they can keep doing very corrupt things. Or do we truly act and make real change? So we are at a turning point, a crossroads right now in our culture in the United States of America and around the world that's happening. As a culture, we need to demand change. We need to decide who we are as a culture. Are we going to continue this, or are we going to change? Racism will not fix itself. We must demand change. We must not tolerate hate or mass shootings or what's going on with opioids or all of these things. We must not tolerate these things. So unfortunately, we have a tall order. We have a lot to change. But there is plenty of hope. And to me, one of the biggest hopes is education. Read a book. I know you may feel like your teacher's making you read a book you're not interested in. Read books. Oh my gosh, that is the worst thing in the world, that students sometimes feel like, oh, I hate reading. Do you know how lucky you are to be able to read? Read books. Educate yourself. Write, learn to write, communicating through writing. Even if you hate writing, learn to love it. You have to be able to communicate and articulate your thoughts. You cannot be passive in this world. So education and learn history, not just history in the history books. That is watered down. Learn all sorts of history from all sorts of cultures. Learn how people have experienced history. So the hope to me is in you. You get to make change. You get to affect change in this world. And taking an investment in your education is the biggest thing that's going to help you know how to make decisions that are going to help you create change in your community, in your family, in your friendships, in your schools, in your world, in your jobs, whatever. Next, I want to mention this too. While we are going through Black Lives Matter, while we are going through COVID-19, while we're going through this incredible time in history, the climate is still being destroyed. We need a world for all of us to be here in. So please just don't forget that. This video, I cannot get into that because of time, but don't forget that we still have a planet that is providing us with everything that we need to live, that we have trashed. And it is not happy about it. And it will not be able to sustain life if we don't take care of it. So I just want to mention that. Not only that, but there are many other issues in the world going on, like the cruelty and horrificness that's going on at the border, the U.S.-Mexican border in this country. It's still going on. It's not okay to treat humans inhumanely. So there's also consumerism going on. We live in a capitalistic society that says if you buy stuff, if you spend money, if you get this thing, if you get that thing, if you get this car, this house, this toy, this video game, these shoes, then you're okay. You need to really understand that consumerism really influences a lot of what's going on. Buy stuff, stuff. Then you'll be happy. Psh, that's not what's important in life. So next, what are your values? What do you care about? The things I care about, I try to come from a place of love, kindness, generosity, service, not selfishness, not fear, not anger, not bullying. So those are some of the values that I try to come by. Love, kindness, generosity, and service are some of my favorite values. You get to choose yours. How do you want to show up in this world? This is up to you. Who are you? Do you want to be active or passive? And what are your values? So I want to ask you that. Now, when you determine as a young person, and I know this is a long video, thank you for watching. When you determine as a young person and you sit down and you pull out a journal or something, you start writing out, what are my values? What are my values? And you write it out. And you start living as best you can with integrity to adhere to your core values. You're going to get resistance. You're going to have people tell you, oh, that's not right, that's not right. You're going to have people try to tell you that your values are not good enough. They will invalidate you. That's called invalidating. And you don't have to agree with me on what my values are. You pick your own. What you need to do is know how to think for yourself. Not choose your values or change your values based on fear or based on programming from culture, because trust me, you've been programmed, I've been programmed, we've all been programmed. The point is how do we learn to think so that we can figure out what's programming and what's our truth, okay? So I want you to think for yourself and choose your own values, not your parents' values, not your teachers' values, not the values of the media, not the values of culture and society. What are your values? And you're going to get resistance. People are going to try to tell you that those are not your values or that they're not good enough or something. Listen to your gut, listen to your heart, listen to what you believe. What are your thoughts? Educate yourself and learn to develop the values that resonate with what you think is right. Again, how do you want to show up in this world? Active or passive? Your values are going to get squashed if it's passive. So my work is in service to kids in education. That's what's important to me in terms of values too. And I know that this stuff doesn't fix itself. And I know that the students that I work with, the executive function stuff doesn't fix itself. We have to take action. So, all right. I want to mention, don't ever say, I hate school. That's a big blanket statement. And I know that you have teachers that maybe shouldn't even be in the classroom, shouldn't even be teachers, and that haven't made you feel good about yourself, that haven't heard you, you haven't felt validated by them, you haven't felt heard by them. Like, I know that happens, but listen, we live in a culture and a society where there is education. I know not all your teachers are going to be good, but get everything you can out of that education, everything you can, because that's going to give you the key to open up any door you want in life. So don't say, I hate school. Think about changing the frame to, yeah, I don't like everything about school, but I'm going to get everything I can out of this and out of my education so that I can have a great life and I can contribute to my communities and my world. I don't. Yeah, I'm looking at my notes. I'm gonna pass that point. I know that there are difficulties in school too, and there's something called social emotional education. Basically, the idea is that even though you have difficulties, learning to deal with them is good. We want you to have tools. We want you to learn how to work with these things, not just give people difficulties automatically, but it's okay if you have struggles in school and in your education. So with Black Lives Matter and connected to you, okay, with Black Lives Matter and black people speaking their truth and their voice and uprising and saying we need things to change. Stop it. It's time. Okay? You too, in learning to live your truth and what you believe and what your gut says, okay? Again, systems are going to resist you doing that. They want you silent. They want you to not question. They want you stagnant. They want you addicted to screen time and distracted from what's really going on. Screens are the biggest distraction. The most important thing you have is your attention. Where does it go? How much screen time does it go to? And what benefit is that screen time to you, your family, your community, your world? But the powers that be that don't want change, the horrific powers, there are good powers, but the negative powers, they love it. If you're on your phone all the time, you're not thinking for yourself, and you don't learn to think for yourself, and you think you hate reading and educating yourself and learning to write and communicate and study, the powers that be love that. They want you silent, not questioning, and stagnant. Okay? Same with the Black Lives Matter movement. The powers that be don't want this movement going on. They want to keep doing things the way they've always done them. They want to continue to have power and money. And not equally. Not equally. So, look, take your education seriously. Really think about where you invest your attention. Is it going to be on screens all the time, or is it going to be in things that enrich your life and enrich the lives of the people around you? And as I wrap up here, look, I think that what I've learned in life is that most people are good. There's bad out there for sure, but most people are good. And I think that what we get to do with education is we get to say, how do we empower the good and disempower the negative? Because this change that we want to see happen is not going to happen easily. It's not going to happen easily. We have to change a whole story. I want to talk about approval seeking. You're going to get resistance and pressure as you start to express who you are and you express your values and your beliefs. There's what's called approval seeking, and that is that we humans, in thinking about the white fragility as well, we are fragile in ways. We are approval seeking. We want to get approval from our friends, approval from our families, approval from our schools and our teachers, approval from our jobs, approval from our government. We want to get approval. And there's something inside of us that is really afraid of saying our truth if we think that somebody's going to disagree with us and not approve of us. So you're going to get a lot of external pressure for you to act the way that somebody else thinks you should act. And what we want to develop, and the better educated you are, the more you will have an internal locus of control where you know you're not a victim of anything. You're in control of your life. You get to make decisions. You don't need to be validated by everybody outside. You can internally validate yourself and say, I know I'm doing the right thing. Even if this person doesn't agree with me and that person, I know I'm doing what's right. And that's what we want. We don't want to be approval seeking to the extent that we sacrifice what we know is right. There are takers and there are givers. There are people that take, and there are people who learn to be generous and to give. And you got to listen. You're going to be okay. Like you can be a generous person. You can be a giver. And I think that that's one of the keys to life is learning how to give. You have skills and talents and things that are going to contribute to this world. So I think I'm about wrapping up, but life is a flicker. It goes by so fast. Time goes by so fast. And every day is precious. It matters, and every action and every thought matters. So we got to learn about what really matters to us. And what really matters in our lives is connection and is people, human beings, is loved ones, is friendships, is equality and freedom and justice and true, really standing up for what's right. Not distractions. Distractions are not what matters. And I just want to warn you that there's a lot of distractions. So taking care of each other to me is what matters. And with Black Lives Matter, that means taking care right now of the Black community and doing what's right, and then taking care of everybody. So today I ask you this question. What can you bring to today? What can you bring to the people that you see? Your family, your community, your friends, the animals, the earth. What can you bring? I hope that every day of your life you'll enter the day with those sorts of thoughts. What can I contribute today? What can I bring today? What can I do to make the world a little bit better of a place today? You matter. This world needs you. Bring your best. Bring your best. We need you. We need your talent. We need what you have. And the last thing I want to say is this. I know that this time in history is hard on you. This is a very intense time, whether you're Black, Asian, Hispanic, white, whoever you are. For you, the young people of today, this is a really scary and stressful time. And we're leaving you with a lot of problems. But there is a lot of good. Most people are good. Focus on what you can bring, and you're going to have a good life. Don't ever give up. Just take little baby steps, take action, and just consider, how do you want to show up? Who do you want to be in this world? You've got a bright future ahead of you. This is not lip service. You do. You get to choose. And I just wish for you the best. I wish for you health and joy and peace and happiness. And I wish that you be able to grow up into a person who gets a lot out of your education so that you can contribute. You can have peace in your heart, peace in your mind, and connection, and realize that all people deserve freedom and equality. And I hope this has been helpful to you. Be well. Again, my name is Seth. If you like what I'm doing, share it, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, subscribe, all the things. But most of all, after you're done with this, go take some action today and bring your best. Be well.